Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Lauren was the kind of girl who could get anything she wanted. In high school, her name echoed through the hallways, and everyone knew who she was. The girls either admired or envied her, and the boys approached just to try to catch a glance or a smile from her. She took care of every detail of her body, her clothes, her flawless makeup. She knew exactly how to attract attention. And she loved that feeling, of being desired, as if she were the main character in a story where the whole world revolved around her. For her, everything was always simple. A smile was enough, and somehow, everything would fall into place. She dated many guys during high school. Every relationship was treated like a trophy, something to show off. Her friends commented, laughed, and always wanted to know who would be the next lucky guy to walk beside her. But among all those guys, there was one who wasn't even mentioned in the conversations. Daniel. He never really sparked any interest. He was the type of student who went unnoticed, with his face buried in books, oblivious to parties and distant from the spotlight of popularity. He avoided drawing attention and preferred the comfort of anonymity. Yet, inside him, there was something no one knew. Since the first year, he had silently fallen in love with Lauren. Daniel watched her from afar, without creating expectations. He kept all his feelings to himself, like a precious secret. He knew he would never be part of her world. While the other guys exchanged glances and tried to start conversations, Daniel focused on his studies. He always believed knowledge was his path. The years passed quickly, and each one led them down different roads. Lauren remained surrounded by people, still vain, concerned with the same things, her body, her clothes, appearances. She never valued serious commitments, believing beauty was enough. Meanwhile, Daniel carved out a completely different path. He got into college easily and already showed impressive talent during his course. He was dedicated, ambitious, but didn't lose his quiet nature. At 25, he had achieved much more than most people his age. He owned a growing tech company, lived in a comfortable house, and proudly fulfilled his childhood dream, buying a Porsche 911 Turbo S, the car he had admired in magazines when he was a kid. He was living proof that silent effort and countless hours spent working had taken him far beyond others who were still lost in fleeting pleasures. Despite all his achievements, something inside him remained unchanged. No matter how much he advanced in so many areas, he still carried that memory of Lauren. It was as if part of him had been stuck in those high school years, in that figure he had never managed to forget. He didn't seek reunions, but he couldn't erase the image of her from his memory. Sometimes, he caught himself wondering what it would be like to see her again, whether she still had the same sparkle or if time had faded some of that charm. And even with so many changes in his life, there were moments when his mind insisted on taking him back to the past, to those days when he could only admire her from afar. Daniel wasn't the invisible boy anymore, but there was something curious. His heart still bore some marks from his youth. It was as if, despite all the maturity he had gained, he was still looking for answers to old questions. His life was full in many ways, but his heart still held secrets he couldn't explain. That's why every memory of Lauren always came with a strange mix of nostalgia and doubt, as if he still needed to live something left unfinished. Even surrounded by new faces, new friendships, and achievements, he still remembered the days at school, the times he watched Lauren walking down the main hallway, surrounded by everyone, as if she were untouchable. And deep inside him, there was still that quiet wish to, at least once, look into her eyes as equals. Even after everything he had built, even with the comfortable life he now led, Daniel carried within him the feeling that some stories don't end when they should. They simply fall asleep, waiting for the right moment to reopen. And he, without realizing it, was still waiting for that moment. The day seemed ordinary for Daniel, like so many others, since his routine had settled between meetings, projects, and strategies to expand his business. He drove through the city streets, lost in his thoughts, with the Porsche smoothly gliding over the asphalt. Each turn brought that sense of victory, a quiet reminder of how hard he had fought to get here. In the middle of the traffic flow and the city's bustle, something caught his attention. It felt like time had briefly paused. She was there. Lauren, with that same sculpted body, the beauty that seemed to transcend time, drew attention wherever she went. He saw her clearly, entering a gym. Her features were just as striking as they were in high school. Without thinking, Daniel turned the wheel and stopped the car, as if an invisible magnet had pulled him to that place. He watched for a few minutes, unable to look away. She smiled at the gym receptionists with the same confidence as always, as if the world revolved around her. Driven by an impulse he didn't even understand, Daniel got out of the car and entered the gym. He walked up to the front desk, trying to hide the reason he was there. With a calm voice, he asked the receptionist if Lauren trained there. The woman smiled and confirmed yes, she worked out every day. Would you like me to call her? Daniel refused immediately, keeping his composure, and said no. With a slight smile, he added that he just wanted to sign up. Without hesitation, he enrolled, signed the papers, and before he realized it, he was already part of that environment that, in some way, smelled like the past he had kept hidden. On their first meeting, Lauren saw Daniel from afar. She waved, with a brief gesture, without changing her expression. To her, Daniel was still the same awkward kid from high school, the one who lived in the shadows of others, always immersed in books. She never imagined who he had become. It didn't cross her mind that the man now standing in front of her was the same shy boy who had secretly loved her for years. During the workouts, Daniel remained discreet. He avoided getting too close, but paid attention to every move, listening to every word she dropped in conversation with others. Lauren seemed unchanged in essence. She talked about diets, new clothes, aesthetic treatments, as if the entire universe revolved around the mirror. It was the same vanity he remembered, except now she seemed more mature in the way she seduced. He, on the other hand, didn't show any rush. He watched from afar, waiting for time to draw the next step. Everything started to change the moment Lauren saw Daniel leaving the gym. Her eyes followed his path until the parking lot. She watched as he opened the door of the Porsche 911 Turbo S, with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what he was carrying. That image stayed engraved in her mind instantly. That car wasn't just any car. It was a symbol of status, of success, something that always caught the attention of someone like her. As she observed, her interest began to awaken almost automatically. Lauren didn't need much information to realize there was something there worth exploring. She started paying closer attention to Daniel in the following days, watching him more carefully, starting conversations with subtle smiles and innocent questions. Little by little, she moved closer, using the charm that had always served as her gateway to everything she wanted. Daniel, aware of every gesture, let himself be carried by her presence, as if an old and dormant part of himself was waking up again. Conversations became frequent. Comments about exercises, sharing advice on nutrition, light jokes between sets. Every word brought them closer. Lauren, with her natural ability to involve others, made everything seem simple, as if it was natural to reconnect with a familiar face from the past. Interest grew as she discovered more about Daniel's new life. He didn't show off, but it was impossible not to notice the level of success he had achieved. The discreet clothes, the expensive watch hidden under the sleeve of his shirt, the way he spoke with confidence and calmness. It was as if each detail was revealed slowly, in a calculated yet irresistible way for someone like Lauren. What began as a casual reunion soon turned into something bigger. The distant looks became complicity. The formal smiles carried an air of intimacy. Lauren, who always liked to be in control, realized this time the game was different. She had to win. And Daniel, even carrying the marks of the past, began to believe that maybe some stories were written to have a second chance. The involvement between them happened without haste, as if each detail was carefully drawn by time. Their conversations became constant. Lauren, with her light and seductive way, made it seem natural, as if destiny had decided to bring them together. Daniel, despite all the control he had always maintained in his professional life, let himself be carried by the feeling of conquest. It was as if, after so many years, he had finally reached what once seemed impossible. Over the weeks, the meetings became part of the routine. Their eye contact already carried a certain comfort, as if there was a silent intimacy between them. She always started the conversation, talking about her workout routines, sharing diets, discussing clothes, and even laughing at trivial situations. Daniel, even aware of how empty these topics were, found himself involved by her charisma. There was something hypnotic about the way she conducted conversations, as if she knew exactly what to say to keep the interest alive. The moment he decided to introduce her to his parents was seen by him as a natural step. He felt ready to show the world that he had conquered more than financial success. He wanted to prove to himself that, besides all the wealth he had accumulated, he was also capable of winning the woman who had always been unattainable. When he suggested the idea of dinner to introduce her to the family, Lauren accepted immediately, with an enchanting smile. She knew that invitation had a greater meaning. At that dinner, everything was revealing. Daniel's parents, with attentive eyes, noticed every detail. They observed the way she spoke, the themes she brought to the table, her almost total lack of interest in any subject that did not involve shopping, beauty, or appearance. While Daniel tried to steer the conversation toward deeper topics, she always returned to the same point, as if the world was reduced to mirrors and shop windows. Daniel's father, a reserved and experienced man, preferred silence. He observed more than he spoke, analyzing every reaction. His mother, with the sensitivity of someone who sees beyond words, also noticed the emptiness behind the beautiful image. Both knew that this enchantment lacked a solid foundation. Nevertheless, they decided not to interfere immediately. They preferred to wait, believing that time would reveal what Daniel's passionate eyes were still unable to see. Meanwhile, Daniel remained blind to the situation. To him, this was the realization of an old dream. Seeing Lauren at his side, sharing moments with his family, seemed the perfect scene of a script written by fate itself. He ignored every sign, every doubtful look from his parents, every uncomfortable silence. He was determined to follow this story, no matter the cost. With each passing day, the relationship between them became even more intense. Daniel, swept up in passion, announced to his family that he intended to marry Lauren. The reaction was immediate. His father, firm and direct, finally broke his silence and said what he thought. He spoke plainly that she wasn't the right woman, that there was something about her that didn't match the family's essence. He stated she was empty, that she only cared about her own image and that this, sooner or later, would bring suffering. Daniel listened in silence, his heart divided between respect for his father and the desire to defend his feelings. Deep down, he knew the words made sense, but he refused to admit it. He was tired of living only by reason and logic. He wanted to feel. He wanted to prove to himself that he could choose his own path, even if it went against everyone else. Despite the warnings, he continued with the wedding plans. He decided to hold the ceremony in a simple way, without big parties, without the presence of his parents, only with a few friends. To him, that was more than enough. He was convinced he would be happy with Lauren, that she, with all her beauty and charisma, would fill the space that had always existed in his life. All he wanted was to believe he had made the right decision. The wedding day arrived without great expectations. The vows were exchanged with a superficial shine, and the smiles were more rehearsed than sincere. Daniel, however, believed that time would build a solid story. He thought that with patience and dedication, he could transform this relationship into something real. In his heart, there was still the hope that the woman who had once been unreachable could finally become the love of his life. All he wanted was to believe he had made the right choice. The first months of marriage were exactly as Daniel had idealized. Lauren seemed satisfied with her new life. She was surrounded by everything she had ever dreamed of: luxury, comfort, and freedom. She spent her days at the gym, shopping without worrying about prices, and caring for her body as if it were a mission. Social media was her favorite stage, where she displayed the perfect routine she now led. The photos showed workouts, trips, dinners at fancy restaurants, and careful poses next to the Porsche Daniel cherished so much. Meanwhile, Daniel dove deeper into work. The company demanded constant attention, and he believed maintaining the business's prosperity was also a way to sustain the marriage. With work consuming all his time, he no longer visited the gym. He believed that by providing everything Lauren desired, she would feel fulfilled by his side. The conversations between them became short, always revolving around trivial topics such as new clothes, plastic surgeries, and places to dine. Even though Daniel tried to bring up different subjects, she effortlessly diverted them, always preferring to talk about herself. Fatigue began to accumulate in Daniel's heart. He felt he was living with a stranger. Lauren's smiles seemed empty. Every day, she drifted further away, immersed in a world where the only concern was maintaining her impeccable image. Daniel started to feel uncomfortable with the coldness in her gestures, the disinterest in sharing any moment beyond appearances. In an attempt to recover some connection, Daniel decided to include her in the world he loved so much. He invited Lauren to work in the company, suggesting she learn about management, marketing, or any area that might interest her. He imagined that by involving her in the business, she would discover a new purpose. Lauren refused without thinking twice. She claimed she didn't see herself working in an office, that her passion was something else, and that she felt happy taking care of her body and living without worries. Lauren's rejection of the offer didn't discourage Daniel immediately. On the contrary, it lit a new idea in him. He believed that if Lauren loved the gym environment so much, perhaps managing one might bring her a new meaning. He started researching franchises, business models, evaluated locations, and made investment projections. With every detail he planned, he felt excited, believing that this time, he would find a way to unite both worlds. He prepared everything in secret, intending to surprise her at the right moment, but didn't finalize any deal before speaking with Lauren. One common afternoon, he left work early, determined to share all his plans with her. He imagined her smile when she discovered he had thought of every detail to give her something so connected to her lifestyle. When he got home, he didn't find her there. He looked at the clock and assumed she was still at the gym. He grabbed the car keys and headed there. When he parked, he saw Lauren exiting the building and entering a man's car. Her gesture was quick and natural, as if it was part of her routine. An uncomfortable feeling spread through Daniel's body. Without thinking twice, he decided to follow the car, keeping a distance to avoid being noticed. Every meter traveled increased the weight in his chest. The two drove for several streets until the car stopped in front of a motel. Daniel parked nearby, unseen. He remained still, watching as Lauren got out of the car with the man and entered the place as if she already knew the way well. It was a difficult scene to digest. That woman, who had shared so many moments with him, was there, betraying his trust with the greatest naturalness. Indignation took over Daniel, who got out of the car and entered behind them, driven by the fury invading his chest. He found them in the lobby, exchanging laughs like a couple with nothing to fear. Her presence made Lauren pale instantly. She tried to justify herself, saying the man had forced her to go there, that she had been surprised and didn't know what was happening. Her words came out in tears and tremors, in a desperate attempt to reverse the situation. The man, without any embarrassment, denied everything. He revealed that the two had been having an affair for months, meeting frequently in various parts of the city. He said she had always shown willingness and that afternoon, it was she who had suggested the meeting. Daniel heard every word as if receiving invisible blows. There was no room for doubts. The truth was there, exposed, with all the evidence he had never imagined witnessing. Shame took over Lauren, who, faced with the revelation, couldn't maintain any more excuses. Daniel didn't say anything. He just looked at her, without a trace of pity, and left the place. As he exited, he struggled to breathe, as if his whole body was about to collapse. The pain was deep, but there was also a bitter relief, as if, deep down, he knew that truth had to be revealed in a brutal way. He returned home in silence, feeling betrayed in a way he had never imagined living. At that moment, every image from the wedding passed through his mind, mixed with memories of his youth, high school, and old fantasies that had accompanied him for so many years. He saw clearly how naive he had been. The weight of reality was now impossible to ignore. And even with a broken heart, he knew exactly what he needed to do from that instant on. Lauren returned home a few hours later. Her face was stained with tears and her clothes were disheveled. She rang the doorbell several times, insistently, while knocking on the door with trembling hands. She called for Daniel with a choked voice, asking for a chance to explain. He stood on the other side of the door, hearing every word without moving a muscle. He didn't say anything. She apologized, said everything had been a mistake, that she deserved at least a talk, that he couldn't just ignore her as if nothing between them had existed. She tried to argue in every possible way, saying she needed to enter, even if just to pick up her clothes and personal items. Daniel remained in absolute silence, not opening the door, as if each plea of hers was a distant echo, incapable of breaking the barrier he had raised there. He knew that if he gave in at that moment, he would lose the little dignity that was still left. Lauren persisted, shouted, cried, but he remained inflexible. When she realized nothing she said would make a difference, she, humiliated, left there and went to her mother's house, with nothing but the clothes on her back and the weight of having been kicked out of a place where, just a few hours ago, she had pretended to live a perfect life. Daniel, alone in that now empty house, closed the curtains and locked every door, as if he wanted to seal the past forever. At that moment, he understood that the end didn't need an audience, only a decision. The next morning, with his face still marked by the sleepless night, Daniel sought out a lawyer. He explained everything with the same coldness that now dominated every word he spoke. He showed documents, recounted the facts, and asked that the divorce process begin as quickly as possible. The pain was immense, but he was determined. He didn't want to live a life based on lies anymore. The lawyer, attentive to every detail, explained that since the company and the house were in Daniel's name long before the marriage, Lauren wouldn't have rights to these assets. It was a protection clause that Daniel himself had included, on his father's recommendation, even without imagining he would one day have to rely on it. Despite that, due to the time they had been married and the property acquired during those 2 years, Lauren still had a right to a considerable amount. The lawyer explained that she could legally demand a portion of the money earned during the marriage. Daniel accepted without questioning. Everything he wanted at that moment was to put an end to this story. Money seemed irrelevant compared to what he had lost internally. The process was quick. Lauren, upon receiving the notice, tried to contact him a few times. She sent messages, called, asked to talk, but Daniel ignored all attempts. There was no room left for any kind of dialogue. It was as if everything he had felt for her had been torn out of him, leaving only an absolute void. Not long after, the divorce was finalized. The judge's final decision confirmed the division of the assets accumulated during the marriage, but preserved all the possessions Daniel had acquired before. Lauren received the amount that was hers and disappeared from his life like a shadow fading at dusk. Even with the pain still pulsing, Daniel knew he needed to complete the cycle fully. A signed paper wasn't enough. He gathered all the remaining memories of her at home, clothes, personal items, old gifts, and removed each one, like pulling splinters out of his skin. When he finished, he felt his chest a bit lighter. It wasn't relief. It was just the feeling that the end had finally been accepted. With everything resolved, he visited his parents. Upon arrival, he was greeted with a silent hug. He sat in the living room, looking around, as if searching for answers in what had always been familiar. His parents, attentive, let him speak. Daniel told every detail. He spoke about the betrayal, the motel, the humiliation, the process, the sleepless nights, and the feeling of being deceived for so long. Every word carried a weight that seemed hard to bear. His eyes, although firm, revealed the pain that hadn't healed yet. His father, calm, listened without interrupting. At the end, he took a deep breath and, with a serene gaze, said a sentence that pierced Daniel like a thin, precise blade. He said that sometimes the price of blindness is high, but that certain lessons in life aren't learned through words, but through scars. He said that true love doesn't need effort to prove its value, and that often the heart falls in love with what shines on the outside, while what truly matters remains invisible to distracted eyes. Daniel fell silent, absorbing each syllable as if those words were a mirror. The lesson slowly sank in with full force. He realized that for years he had deluded himself with the image of someone who had never truly existed. Lauren was just a reflection of an old obsession fueled by pride and vanity. It wasn't love. It was a desire to relive the past and prove something to himself. What remained, in the end, was the bitter but necessary lesson. Not everything we desire is, in fact, what we need. Sometimes, we have to lose everything to understand the true meaning of gaining. Daniel, even wounded, understood that he had come out stronger from that story, even though the price had been too high to forget anytime soon. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.